More learning experiences. I feel I must record a couple more adventures or misadventures, depending on how one views them. They were learning experiences, if nothing else. I was in my middle teens, and the weather was very summery. The war was over. We had a little more money than in previous years. I guess we were all feeling restless. My brother Donald chummed around with Sammy Davis, who had a coop at the time. Someone mentioned that the girls' softball team was playing in Jasper and suggested we go see them play. It seemed a novel idea, so Red and I asked if we could join them. That was our first mistake, though we didn't realize it at the time. This coupe didn't have a rumble seat, so Don, Red, Tom, Sam, and I all piled into the only seat. Off we went on our potholed, mud-rutted highway. We traveled quite a distance in a very uncomfortable position until we became so unbearable we decided to flip coins, leaving the two losers to ride in the trunk. Red and Don lost and had to move to the rear of the coupe as we continued on our way. This was our second mistake, as we should have returned home while it was still possible to do so. We finally reached the Yellowhead Highway and headed west to Jasper. Red and Don had to close the trunk to stop the fumes from coming in. Things were going nicely when, boom, a flat tire. We got out, stretched, changed the tire, and were on our way again. We'd hardly covered any distance when we had another flat. With no spare tire or repair equipment, we decided to pack the tire full of gravel. This feat, though more difficult than anticipated, was completed, and we were off again. The ride was rougher, but tolerable. We traveled a few more miles before we experienced another flat. We couldn't believe it. More flats in one trip than the average of a whole year. There was nothing else we could do but pack the other tire with gravel. On our way once again, it seemed things were going to work out for us after all. But the gravel in the tires began to shift, and it started to feel like the rear was running on pogo sticks. You could hear Red in the trunk telling Don not to start laughing, or they wouldn't be able to control themselves. But it was no use, they started to laugh hysterically. I can't describe their laughter, but it was contagious. They finally yelled, "Stop!" This we did. They decided it was easier to run alongside the car than to be jiggled and jolted in the trunk. However, they didn't have to run for very long because the car conked out. We decided to continue walking and maybe get a lift. That was an intelligent choice considering not a single vehicle of any kind had passed us going east or west during our time on that highway. It was really getting hot as we plodded along. All of a sudden, we heard a motor and a truck rounded the corner. It was one of Bob Spanish's trucks. We waved for them to stop, but they waved back and kept right on going. We wondered why they had not stopped, and then we noticed that Sam and Tom were picking flowers. Must have appeared we were out for a relaxing stroll. After exchanging a few pleasantries, we hit the road again. We walked mile after mile without a sign of traffic until we came to the railroad crossing. The majority decided it would be easier to walk along the railroad tracks as it was on the level and not so hilly. With spirits still pretty high, this is what we did. The sun was getting hotter and hotter, and we were getting hungrier and hungrier. Then, to our delight, somebody noticed the wild strawberries. They were pretty big for wild strawberries, but they sure had good flavor. That is until one of us realized that they were growing along the tracks where the transcontinental passenger train toilets were flushed. With 4 transcontinentals crossing the country every day for years and years, I doubt if any area was missed, except at stations. They had notices in all passenger car washrooms. Please refrain from flushing toilet while train is standing in the station. All of a sudden, no one was feeling too well. I'm sure some of us would have brought everything up if there had been anything there to bring up. We discussed the fact that the horse, cow, and chicken manure we used to grow our vegetables, and that didn't bother us. We kept on walking, but nobody ate any more of the delicious wild strawberries. We continued our trek for another hour or more, which seemed forever, and then at last we saw a station in the distance. With a new burst of energy, we soon arrived at the door of the Pedley station to find it locked and seemingly vacant. We pressed the doorbell a couple of times and waited. A question was what to do next. As the girls' softball game would be over by now, there was no longer a reason to continue on the journey to Jasper. Red pressed on the doorbell once more, and at last, to our relief, the door opened. I couldn't believe it. It was over 90 degrees above, and the station agent stepped out onto the platform in his heavy winter long johns. He worked nights and had been asleep. After telling him our problem, he told us a train would be going east at 1400, 2 p.m. He agreed to flag it down for us if we wished him to do so. That settled, we asked if we could buy some food from him. He had very little that did not need preparation, but came up with a 1-pound tin of salmon and a loaf of bread with no butter. That was worth 60 to 70 cents. We gave him a $5 bill, but he had no change, and neither did we. We ended up paying the 5. In a very short time, he was back down in his long johns to flag down the train. The freight train and the passenger car on the end pulled the station and stopped by the platform. We boarded, paid our fares, and headed for Edson. We disembarked at Edson and entered the beanery. We were hungry. Liberty Joy from Catamount ran the beanery in the Edson station. We told him our tale of woe, and he bought us each a delicious steak. The next stop was Catamount. After arriving home, Sammy and Don returned to get the car. When all was tallied up, it cost us over $100 in a day and a half to go nowhere, see nothing, and accomplish nothing. At this time, $10.95 a day was a very good wage. In my youth, I traveled to Vancouver many times, but only 3 times to Edmonton. When we were lads, my parents took Don and me to see our uncles, Fred and Jack Brown, brothers of Dick Brown of Catamount. They lived on the flats, and Jack was a manager of the coal mines there. Many people were not aware of the old coal mines under Edmonton. Of all the unfamiliar sights and experiences, it was the stairway going down to the flats that I remember most vividly. It felt like the descent would never end. The second time I was in Edmonton was when we played hockey against a team on the south side. The high-level bridge was impressive, and the Strathcona Hotel seemed so large in those days. In 1947, 4 of us decided to go to Edmonton for the weekend. After cashing our paychecks, we headed for Edmonton in the Douglas 1937 Buick. We drove into Edson on the potholed gravel road. In Edson, Red asked me to drive for a while. Down the highway, we could see a big fire. We drove and drove, but seemed no closer to the blaze. And then, halfway to Edmonton, we realized it was the oil well at Leduc. The first well they brought in was on fire. It burned so brightly that in Edmonton, you could actually read a newspaper by its glow in the dead of night. We approached Edmonton on the gravel highway, and then turned down Jasper Avenue. Being tired and hungry, we looked for hotel rooms first and found 2 in the Queen's Hotel just off Jasper Avenue. Satisfied with the accommodations, we went out and had a bite to eat before returning for a good night's sleep. In the middle of the night, Red woke to find someone in our room. "Hey, what are you doing here?" Red yelled. In a very drunken voice, somebody answered, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm in the wrong room. I'm so sorry." I was sleeping close to where we'd hung our pants, so Red instructed me to check my pockets. This I did and was pleased to find my wallet still there. I was just settling to get back to sleep when Red asked me, if the door was locked, how did he get in? Red was fully awake as he went to check his pants pockets. Not only was his wallet gone, but the car keys. He asked me how much money I had left, and upon checking my wallet, I realized the intruder had cleaned me out and replaced the wallet. Red must have interrupted the thief before he was able to slip the emptied wallet back into Red's pocket. We woke Ross Lomer and Walter Higgins to find that they had their wallets, but like mine, they were empty. It dawned on us that we had been rolled. It was all we could do to keep Red off the clerk. The poor man was in a state of terror, begging and pleading for us to believe that he knew nothing of the culprit or how he accessed our rooms. Coming off the coal branch, we were naive to big city ways and didn't know what part of the city was taboo. Luckily for us, Dr. Beggs, who was related to the Douglases, supplied us with enough money for a locksmith and the means to get home. Unlike our previous adventure, we did get to our destination, but as before, we saw nothing, did nothing, and paid much. 4 paychecks plus.